When I make a post on LinkedIn about starting a series on futures and foresight, it was something that came out of a lot of thought. I have been studying industries for almost the last 3 years, and prior to that, almost 20 years in market research. It was something that I saw there was a deep problem or deep challenge that was there, which is the myth of stability. Now, when you look at the entire future of any business or even an individual life for that matter, I had to look back at where this flashpoint actually started, and COVID was one of those flashpoints. We went back into our homes, we worked from there, we found entertainment means inside these houses. A lot of us have started paying a lot more attention to our health. While things had changed, we did see shocks around the supply chains also come about. And while these things have actually stabilized in the last few years, is this the same normal that we're talking about as we did, prior to COVID? Is the question that we need to be asking. And our answer to that is no. Because of the fact that a lot of us have now taken on and understood, okay, we can do a hybrid work culture, we could do a work from home culture. We are talking about ordering in more food than eating outside. There are changes within the consumer behavior also. So obviously that kind of changes the entire scenario for cascading industries, cascading businesses. It's a very interesting scenario that is actually still developing. Now, over a period of time, yes, when you look beyond a certain point before COVID and you look at, say, maybe the last 20 years or so, since the internet has actually taken shape and everything, we have had periods of uncertainty. It is not that we have not had, but after a certain point, we did have some stability, and that myth of stability continued for a long period. And it has now come to a point where you're looking at the marketplace and saying, is there true stability in terms of business, in terms of our work culture, in terms of our life? And that is where a lot of businesses are going to go through a lot of pain if they are not prepared for this kind of a new marketplace and new consumer behavior, new businesses, everything put together. So when you understand how the businesses have changed or the life has changed, foresight and futures becomes one of the primary things that most businesses should look into. Most individuals should also look into. It takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of cost also, but it kind of tells you what's truly happening on the ground zero. October 2022 is when we actually had the announcement of ChatGPT by OpenAI. And since then, from 2022 onwards till 2026, we are now faced with a very interesting challenge, is that we are seeing the fluid nature of AI and its growth and its explosion, which is having its cascading impacts on every industry. It's not that any industry is exempt from this kind of this one. It's almost every industry. We already did have a lot of existing data issues which are still continuing. It is not that these issues are solved. So when you talk about the data being present such that we can actually use that to create a framework to actually build stability, that framework itself is not working. It's not exactly going as per plan for a lot of businesses, even for the government for that matter. And individuals are also seeing that, whether it is their jobs, whether it is their life, it's become a little bit a challenge that we're trying to actually get into. And that's why futures and foresight for any industry becomes an extreme importance. It's whether we are going to survive the next 10 years or next 5 years. And I say 5 years not from my own personal experience, but from somebody who has actually done this work for a fair amount of time. I refer to Richard Sharma. He had once said in his book that, when you talk about long-term returns, especially in the financial markets, it's about 5 years. You're not talking 50 years into the market, into the future, because you're today with that kind of understanding, 50 years into the future is going to be really difficult. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people who have seen rotary phones and are today using touchscreens and probably, they are using the AI technology to actually learn. That's something that is a huge change in the way that they have experienced it. I've personally experienced rotary phones myself at my home. So I can tell you that this is not something unknown for my own generation. And further down the line, the newer generations are actually seeing those impacts. They're seeing, there are challenges that are coming about. And it's not as easy when we talk about it because futures and foresights, these are areas where you invest in not because of uh, a liking, but it's actually become a need if you want to survive long term, if you want to not have too many shocks. And a lot of times this means taking a step back and looking at everything. Now, obviously, my whole project is going to be looking at most of what is happening around the business space. So, obviously, I'm talking about the cross industry impact or the industry cascades that we are having and the supply chain issues that have only increased in the last few years. I mean, I don't think COVID has really solved that issue. We are just seeing a mutation of it. And that's becoming more and more apparent for a lot of people because investments into these spaces have to be done. They have to be taken care of. These investments have to start paying off almost immediately for a lot of businesses, which may not always be the case. That when you look at the kind of supply chains that we have created, it may not always be as easy to lift and shift or just find new places where you can put the machinery or invest in them because there are other issues. It's not just the machinery and the land or probably the electricity or the water, but what about talent? Is the talent really there to actually support in that kind of a manner? All these are impacts that are having. I mean, in any industry today, when you look at it, there is a cross industry impact. You believe that you're working in probably the energy sector, but other sectors contribute directly to the energy sector, like say the glass industry contributes to the solar panels, or you're looking at precious metals like silver. They contribute, then the price increases impacts the solar panels prices. These are issues that are continuing and they're still a part of the entire supply chain. And hence, it's as an example, when you take into each industry and you start going down into industry, you see every industry talking to each other. You sense that there is challenges that are already there within the marketplace. You sense that governments are also stressed out on this kind of factor. Individuals are also stressed out, and it's become more and more very clear that the old ideas of the old methods, they tend to have a certain limitation. Whenever people today talk about say trend analysis, which was something that I used to do, we used to actually do a lot of trend analysis, and we found that there was the trends used to continue for some time. But as of say maybe in the last couple of years that I have been seeing, the entire idea of a trend analysis does not seem to be as good, or as it's not on the foundation that is strong, because the foundation itself is changing. The breakdown happens because technology changes, people change, the government actually changes a lot of other things. There are regulatory interventions, regulatory issues that come into play. All those put together, it becomes a very big issue for businesses and even for individuals. I mean, if the government decides to change personal income taxation, then it becomes a challenge for even an individual. And these are issues uh, that are compounding. They are not exactly getting solved at the ground zero. There is a compounding factor that's happening. And that is why, if you want to look at the future from a business angle, from even an individual angle, I mean, look at the jobs market as of this moment. And that kind of tells you the story that having a clear futures and foresight plan is going to be of extreme importance. It may continue to become one of the bigger industries in the days to come. And I do know that a lot of larger companies, they definitely have people doing this as a part of their entire work, their key result areas that they are actually working on. So they becomes a part of the KRA because they want to survive the business. And this works for the larger companies. It's much, much more easier because of the fact that they have the war chest to go ahead and do that, which may not be the case with small and medium enterprise or even an individual. So the pivot has to be faster. So do we actually start now and we stop after some time, or is it now becoming a fact that when you talk about futures and foresight, it's becoming a reality for everybody on a daily basis. The answer is the latter. It is actually becoming a daily basis kind of a checkpoint. A lot of things that we are actually looking at is still becoming it's a developing scenario, it's a developing issue. Sustainability and business is another issue that I feel that is actually driving so many issues. We are getting new jobs in sustainability, but where are the people, the talent that we need to actually be able to execute those things? That needs to be on the ground. Then when you look at sustainability and business, you realize that businesses themselves have to get compliant because the government and the regulatory intervention in these spaces are also increasing. When you look at these issues and you try to understand what is actually happening, it becomes a very interesting challenge to solve. It becomes a very interesting issue to be looked at very closely. So, as of this moment, it is actually necessary to put a lot of these issues under an electron microscope, not as normal microscope, but an electron microscope, and try to understand what's actually happening in those smaller areas and those little bits that's actually changing a lot of things, the butterfly effect, as we call it. Uh, Along with this, when we actually look at the geopolitical risks that are actually rising up across the world, these are also changing. I mean, every sector from, we talk about different sectors being disparate, but right now, when I'm looking at it from taking, say, a couple of steps back, I see issues such as agriculture having its issue, defense having its issue, composite materials which contribute to commercial transport as well as defense. They have their own issues. The supply chains are actually getting a little bit this one. And in all this, if you are a business or an individual who's looking at the futures, and if you're not looking at futures and foresight for that matter, uh, it would be of great issues. It would be of a great disservice to your own business. You do not know what's going to happen 2 months hence. You do not know what's going to happen 3 months hence. Are you prepared for something that is a direct and a very drastic change? That's the question that we need to be asked. And when you take into consideration all these pointers, it becomes very apparent that when we talk about futures and foresight, it's not that when do I have to make up investment, it is more like how do I start immediately? That is the more pertinent question right now for every business and every individual.